there, folks. My name is Paul Kimball. I am recording this on my iPad, which means I'm naturally going to look slightly to, I think you're right or my left, whatever. I can't do it. Camera's up there and it's just force of habit. Because ace film and video professional that I am, I can't figure out how to get my camera synced up with my Yeti mic. So I am totally going to fix this in post. I'm doing this the old-fashioned way. I'm going to use my iPad to record it with the audio stream, and then I'm going to sync up with my Yeti mic in Adobe Premiere Pro, which is way more work than I should have to do, but I'm kind of smart enough to do it, but dumb enough not to figure out how to do it properly, if that makes any sense. You know, given the world that we're living in, sure, why not? First of all, I want to thank my good, dear friend, Ryan Sprague, or as I like to call him, Ryan, for inviting me to present again at the ANOMACON. I was one of the original presenters in year 1. Somehow Ryan has made it to year 3, despite his best efforts and his consistent promises while we've been out filming a television show called Haunted to never do this again. And yet, somehow, he always manages to do it again, which is good, maybe not for Ryan's mental and physical health, but for you folks watching at home or wherever you're watching, I suppose it's good for you because there's always lots of good content and one or two speakers that I can't stand. Maybe I'm one of them. I don't know. Anyway, tonight or today, it's tonight for me. You can see it's dark out there. I'm going to be serious, sadly. Usually I'm a bit of a goofball. The last time I was here, I was talking about, if I look over there, I can almost look straight at you folks. If you guys go sit over here, I'll actually be looking at you. So if you're home, just orientate yourself over there. This is very weird. The last time I was here, I was talking about ghosts because at the time I was directing and co-hosting a television series called Haunted. I have since been fired from that show by myself. I fired myself from the show and turned it over to other people because I just didn't want to do it anymore. So you'd think, well, okay, Paul's not going to be talking about ghosts. I'm going to be talking about UFOs, sort of. I did do early in my career, from about 2000 to 2008, a series of documentaries about the UFO subject, or as we call it now, the UAP subject, or as Michael Stan Friedman called it, flying saucers. I much prefer flying saucers. And what I talked about in those documentaries were a biography of Stan and Majestic 12 and the Aztec UFO case, or hoax as it really was. And then a best evidence list of top 10 UFO cases as voted by UFO researchers. And I'm not going to talk about any of that tonight because, as I consistently remind Ryan, I'm out, baby. I checked out of the UFO subject years and years ago. I saw Jim Moseley famously called me the future of ufology, which I think he meant as a compliment, but I was never actually sure. Knowing Jim, could have gone either way. I think it was a bit of both. And I said, no, thanks. Don't want to do that. I have a life to live. So no. But I am going to talk about, all kidding aside, and mostly all kidding aside, I'll probably still make a few jokes, something that is darker, more serious, but does touch upon the UFO subject, touches upon pretty much all paranormal research in a sense, certainly on conspiracies. I mean, it's all tied in together. And if you are here, you've probably read the title in the ANOMACON website or whatever Ryan put up, which I think is ufology, fascism, the far right, racism, and how it all mixes together. That is not the actual title, but it's kind of what the talk is about. So I'm not going to be talking tonight about UFO cases or witnesses or whether they're space aliens from Zeta Reticuli or what UFOs are. Don't care. You can make up your mind. I'll make up my mind. We all have our own opinions. I'm not talking about ghosts. I'm not talking about Bigfoot or anything. I'm talking about, well, Nazis, sort of. And the history, to be more precise, of how the far right has used and infiltrated the subject of UFOs in particular over the years for its own purposes, and how it's gotten a lot worse. But I'm going to go even a little bit further and not just talk about Nazis or neo-Nazis or anti-Semites, but also just in general racism, some of it overt, some of it more subtle, that has infected, if you will, or cloaked the UFO subject from the beginning of time to today. And all of this is only getting worse. That should come as no surprise in the era of Trump and of what I call a transnational, I'm not the only one, but what I refer to my friends as a transnational far-right movement that is consistently and has been for many years trying to undermine Western liberal democracy around the world, wherever you'd see it. So I'm going to, it's going to be hard to find any jokes here, but I might try one or two, because I find humor is a useful thing, especially when you're dealing with something such a fraught subject and such a dark and, frankly, for me, distressing and disturbing subject, because I take it all very seriously. So a very brief bit about me. It's like, hey, we get that Kimball makes films, and he did some stuff on UFOs and ghosts, and by the way, museums and jazz music and pro wrestling. I've done a lot of films about a lot of things. What qualifies him to talk about what he's going to be talking about tonight? What makes his opinion any more valid than anyone else's? The answer to that is probably nothing. Our opinions, at least at a base level, are all equal. But if you want to judge whether I know what I'm talking about or not, here's my actual background, long before I became a filmmaker. So I have an honors degree in history from Acadia University here in Canada. Also spent a year studying at the University of Dundee in Scotland, where Ryan is now. I won the University Medal at the University of Dundee. So take that, Scots. I went over and stole it from you. And then I came home and I won the University Medal when I graduated here from Acadia University. Wrote my thesis, my honors thesis, on the origins of the Second World War in Europe. So, hey, Nazis and fascists and appeasers. Not talking about them tonight. Although, weirdly enough, as I'm recording this, Russia was apparently sending drones across the border into Poland tonight, and NATO was responding. Hopefully I'm still here in the morning and not a nuclear wasteland or something. But one could learn a lot about the appeasement going on with Russia right now by studying the appeasement that I studied that happened in the 1930s. Not what I'm here to talk about tonight. So then I went to law school. Yay! And look at me, patting myself on the back. And my major paper in law school, because we all had to write one, was in legal history, which, by the way, pro tip for any of you kids out there that are thinking of going to law school and you're going to make a lot of money and everything. Legal history, that is not a lot of money in there. So try corporate law instead. A lot of money in corporate law. So anyway, I didn't want to do corporate law. I wrote my paper in legal history. And what was it about? Say it with me. Nazis. So it was about the Nuremberg trials, international law, war crimes trials, the Nuremberg trials. In particular, the subject, although I had to do a deep dive into the Nuremberg trials, was Fritz Sauckel, who was the Nazi plenipotentiary, I think was the actual title. It's been a long time, but basically the Minister of Labor. So he was the one who would go around and get the slave labor from all the various countries that the Germans occupied. And Albert Speer, who was the armaments minister under Hitler from about 1942 on. And comparing their two cases, Speer they were both convicted, but Speer was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. And he served them at Spandau Prison, survived, and then went on to a reasonably lucrative and successful career afterwards as sort of the good Nazi, is what they called him. Hey, I didn't know about the Holocaust. But let me tell you about what it was like inside. And by the way, I tried to assassinate Hitler, which is not true. And Sauckel, so Speer was an architect, came from an upper class background or middle upper class background, was articulate and handsome and relatively young. And Sauckel was not. He was pudgy and he had a little Hitler mustache. Pro tip again for defense attorneys. If you're being tried as a Nazi war criminal, you might want to have your client shave off the Hitler mustache when Hitler's dead and they're looking for someone to stand in his place. Sauckel didn't do that. Que sera, sera. They hanged him. Now, I would have hanged both of them. But the judges gave 20 years to Speer and a death sentence to Sauckel. And so my paper was delving into why that happened and some of the inequities behind that and sort of a socioeconomic analysis, a class analysis of why the better looking, younger, more articulate person who evinced some small degree of regret, even though, oh, I didn't do it, but it was terrible what was done, was more successful in sort of convincing the largely Western judges. I think the Soviets wanted to hang him, but they were outvoted, that he shouldn't be hanged, whereas Sokal, who came from a working class background and was not articulate and, again, looked like Hitler, at least mustache-wise, was hanged. And I always thought that was unfair. I would have hanged them both. So that was my analysis. None of that has anything to do with UFOs. Sorry about that, folks. But I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Nazis because I've studied them for the last 35 years. And then as my career went on, both as well, it didn't last long as a young lawyer, but as an historian, as a filmmaker, and just as a citizen, I continued to be interested in what I saw as an ever creeping rise in far-right thought, going all the way back to the late 1980s. And it probably goes back even further. But it was started to really, around the end of the Reagan era, started to really kind of get its grasp in a way that it hadn't. I mean, these were kooks. Everybody looked at these far-right people as kooks in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Dangerous kooks, if they had enough guns, but not a real threat. And some of it started, though, to work its way, and I think it did happen in the Reagan years, into the general political conversation in the United States. Less so in other places, although it caught up to them later. And take a look at the far-right parties that have risen up in Europe or the United Kingdom, or to some degree, even here in Canada. So anyway, I continued to look into that. And then I sort of wandered into ufology because I was making films about it in 2000 and for about the next 10 or 11 years. And as part of the filmmaking process, I'm a huckster. Like, my job is to make a film and then go sell the film, which is to say to convince you folks to watch the film. So I made myself aware of the UFO subculture and the people that were in it who were researchers. So Stan I knew because he was my uncle. But guys like Kevin Randall, the late Carl Flock, I could go down the list, Bruce McAdee, those guys. I got to know them, and that's what I was focused on. So I made a terrible, terrible error, little known to me. I wasn't as discriminating about what shows I would go on as I should have been, largely because all of these guys, who all seemed, most of them, relatively sensible and sane to me, would go on those shows. So they would say, oh yeah, sure, you want to go on this show? Yeah, they're fine. I've been on that show like 8 times, or in Stan's case, 5,000 times. I don't know. So there was a show that I went on. I think it was 2004. Pretty sure I was in Vegas at a UFO conference. In fact, I know I was. I was being interviewed by Linda Moulton Howe, ace UFO researcher, legend in the field. Never really liked her myself, but que sera, sera, she was there. And she was doing the interview, though, for a show called The Jeff Rense Show. Now, if you've never listened to The Jeff Rense Show, good for you. You never should. And nobody should ever appear on it. And I did. And it just seemed like another radio show. They'd set up a studio at this UFO conference that I was speaking at in Vegas. It was Ryan Wood's MJ12 conference or whatever it was, because I was making a film about MJ12. It's where I met Peter Robbins. I met some people there. Stan was there. I think Stan did the Rense show too. And so I didn't think anything about it. And then I just got a little hinky. I sort of had met enough people over the UFO, the 4 or 5 years I'd been in ufology, to start going, not all of these people are sane. And not all of these people seem like they have good intentions. So I'm just going to do a looking. And I looked into the Rense show. That's one of the stops I made. And look, I'll just say, Jeff Rense is an anti-Semite. He's a supporter of neo-Nazis. He is a bad dude. And I immediately regretted going on Rense's show, which was quite a popular show. I don't know what it does now. I don't even know if Rense is still alive. I think he is. So there was Coast to Coast with George Norrie. That was the big enchilada. And then there was the Jeff Rense show, which was kind of like the junior Coast to Coast. It was the AEW to coast WWE for you wrestling fans. And then there were all the other shows, and podcasting was just starting to really come online. But there were some other radio shows that were less popular, didn't have as far reach. But the Rense show had a reasonably good reach. And he had unbeknownst to me, he had a website and everything. So I went to the website. And the stuff I saw on the website compelled me to do two things. One, to take all of that old history knowledge and research into the Nazis and to the far right and anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial that I had done for many years and say, cool, I'm going to use that because I have to look at this subculture, this group through a different prism now, given what I'm seeing on the Rense website. And I created a blog called The Rense Watch. Let me tell you, I have never, ever had as much hate mail sent to me as I did when I was doing the Rense Watch. And I think I only made like 6 posts or 7 posts. People accusing me I showed some of them to my wife and she said, you have to stop doing this. Like somebody's going to shoot you. These people are serious. People accusing me of being a Zionist stooge, of being an Israeli agent, an agent of Mossad. All I was posting was saying, hey, look, here's this imagery on the Rense website. An octopus with its tentacles over the earth and a Star of David on it and looking mean, like not a happy octopus, but And so here it is on the Rense website, a modern version of it. And here it is in Der Stürmer, which was there's bad Nazism, and then there was Der Stürmer, which was instrumental in creating the mindset in the German people that the Jews were subhuman and could be eventually what they did to them during the Holocaust, killed. So, like I said, no ha-ha in large parts of this talk, folks. So anyway, there you go. There's the octopus from Der Stürmer. There's the octopus that's on Rense's website. All sorts of images like that. And the clue, the real clue, was that he was publishing articles by a guy named Ernst Zundel. I kid you not, I'm not making it up. There was actually a human being once named Ernst Zundel. Sounds like something you get in a really bad spy novel from the 60s or something. But there he is, Ernst Zundel. Ernst Zundel was one of the worst Holocaust deniers that I've ever run across, certainly the worst one in Canadian history. And I was well aware of him because I had read a book, a very good book that I would recommend to everyone called Web of Hate, which by an author called Warren Kinsella, who's been a politician, a political consultant. He's a lawyer as well. And he has been a consistent exposer and campaigner against the far right here in Canada. And so Web of Hate, weirdly enough, is one of my favorite books because it dealt with the subject that I was interested in and really sort of dug deep into who these people were. So Zundel, who I was also aware, because he was all over the Canadian media, we were trying to deport him. We eventually did, back to Germany, where he was eventually died. Zundel was just beyond the pale, reprehensible character. And there he was on the Jeff Rense website as a political prisoner. He's writing like, I think this was during the time when we were deporting him and the Germans were at him and were thinking of trying him for hate speech and denying the Holocaust and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, well, if I had any doubt that Rense was not only an anti-Semite, but promoting anti-Semitic thought and writings, here it is, Ernst Zundel. Now, Ernst Zundel is an interesting cat, though, because Ernst Zundel ties into the UFO subject. And you're thinking to yourself, wait, how does I get Rense? So Rense would have UFO people on and talk. And so I get Rense. And I get that Rense had guys like Zundel on his website. So that's bad. Trust me, it is. And the imagery. So maybe Paul's made his point, and we're going to go look this up ourselves, but there might be something to this Rense thing. But Ernst Zundel, he's a Holocaust denier. He's an anti-Semite. He's a neo-Nazi. What the heck does that have to do with UFOs? Well, fun story. Zundel published a UFO zine. And he didn't believe in the UFO stories, but he used it as a recruiting tool for his neo-Nazi movement. His belief being, if you could find people who were dumb/gullible enough to believe that the Nazis had survived the Second World War, relocated to Antarctica, built a base there, and had a secret super science UFO base in Antarctica. Well, you're dumb enough to buy that the Holocaust didn't happen. That was basically where he was coming from. So it was a recruitment tool largely to identify idiots. And look, no, I'm not going to make any apologies. Anybody who buys that stuff, idiots. And if you're watching this right now and you buy that stuff, I'm sorry. You're an idiot. And if you bought Zundel's stuff, you were also an anti-Semite as well. So you're a hateful idiot. I suspect none of those people are watching. And if they were, they're not watching anymore, which is good. So Ryan, occasionally it's worth losing a couple of viewers. I know you know that, but when they're neo-Nazis, here's the door. Don't let it hit you on the ass on the way out. So anyway, he actually at one point advertised that he was organizing an expedition to Antarctica. So besides being a neo-Nazi and anti-Semitic, Zundel was also kind of a fraudster because the trip never happened. But it's like, we'd like you to sign up and here's what it's going to cost. And we'll go down and we're going to travel, hey, penguin, hey, Nazi penguin, can you tell us where Hitler is and the UFOs? Because clearly both of them are still down here, right? And penguins will be like, no. So Zundel, look him up if you really want to, because I'm trying to whiz through this, because I promised Ryan I try and keep this under 40 minutes, because I'm long-winded. So Zundel ties in to Rense. And, you could back then, like this was 20 years ago, Zundel further back, you could sort of shrug your shoulders maybe and go, well, Zundel was a kook. He was. There were other people. I tangled with a guy named Malcolm Ross, who's a teacher up here in Canada and an anti-Semite and a Holocaust denier. And I got into it with him publicly when I was in college because I called him out on it. And, we were writing letters back and forth in the local paper. I think it was the Halifax Herald. So there were others, but Zundel was by far the worst and in Canadian history. And so you go, Zundel, fine, he had some UFO stuff. And there's probably 61 people who were dumb enough to buy into that. And yes, Rense then weaponized it, or at least used it, because Rense was an anti-Semite and is in promoting anti-Semitic conspiracy stuff and Holocaust denial. And hey, Zundel, put you here, we'll frame you as a political prisoner, a hero of the right, and we'll put you on our website a lot. And by the way, we'll also use neo-Nazi symbolism that literally you could pull right out of the 1930s Der Stürmer and other magazines. Terrible. So, okay, Paul, how, that's bad, but this penny ante stuff, there's nothing there. Well, maybe, except when you look at aspects of ufology that go beyond that, or at least aspects of ufology that tie into that and maybe touch upon other things, you see guys like Billy Meyer. Wait, is Paul about to say that Billy Meyer is a racist? Look, I don't know Billy Meyer. I know he's a huckster, so anything's possible. But it's his aliens I want to talk to you a little bit about. That would be the Pleiaren. That's kind of what they sound like. Now, the Pleiaren, if you were to look at pictures of them, they all seem to look like members of ABBA. Why were the Pleiaren and many of the contactees, this goes back to the 1950s, white and blondish, whitish, whatever hair, and really good looking too? Well, that sounds a lot like the master race. Think too about how UFO cases are often described. I've talked about cultural, back when I talked about stuff like this, cultural bias within ufology, particularly in reporting sightings and cases. And one of my favorite examples to trot out is the Father Gill case from the 1950s in Papua New Guinea, where a missionary, Father Gill, saw, as I recall, a UFO, that's my UFO sound, going by, and you could see the people in the UFO. There were like windows and people were looking out. And it wasn't just him. There were, as I recall, dozens, and hey, fact check me on that, if it was 21 or 18, I don't know, local people from Papua New Guinea who also witnessed this sighting. Now, ask yourself this question. The overwhelming majority of ufologists coming from the United States and Western Europe, even today, still true. Trust me on this one too, the overwhelming majority of them white, most of them were men. There are a few exceptions, but most ufologists have been men, certainly until recent times, and I think most still are. They refer to the case as the Father Gill sighting. I would refer to the case as the Papua New Guinea sighting, or whatever the particular community was. You can pick your term, like the RB-47 case from 1957. People call it the RB-47 case. It's quite accurate. It describes a plane, the RB-47. That's the case. Everybody knows what they're talking about. They don't name the pilots. They don't say it's the Lewis Chase case. He was the primary pilot. They, RB-47 case, Roswell. Nobody calls it the Glenn Dennis case or the Walter Haut case or the Mac Brazel case. They're witnesses, and there's a whole category of people there. It's the Roswell case, the Aztec case. I mean, I can just go down. But the Father Gill case, oh, that's not the Papua New Guinea case. It's the Father Gill case. Read up on the Father Gill case. Pretty much everything that Western ufologists focused on was Father Gill. And, the sort of local yokels who, there's a video of me talking about this back, I think, 15 years ago at the Retro UFO conference, when I was a little more persnickety. But, kind of looking, very colonial. I'll say a very colonialist way of looking at it. Well, Father Gill, good, upstanding missionary. These people are nice people, but perhaps, not the smartest, or we not sure we can trust them. But Father Gill, we can trust him. He's one of us. I don't think that way. But ufology does, or has for many, many years. And I'm not convinced that it doesn't still think that way, at least in some respects. So, if I made my case for the influence of the far right in the UFO subject, I'm just touching the surface. I could go on about Rense for days. In fact, I did when I had the Rense watch, but my wife has made me promise not to talk at length about Jeff Rense and his show and anti-Semitism and ufology really ever again, other than this one, which she doesn't know I'm doing. So don't tell her, whatever you do. But that's not the end of it. And I'm sorry if I seem a little scattered, because all joking aside, what is happening in the liberal democratic world now is incredibly distressing to me. I ran for office 8 years ago. I always wanted to be prime minister up here in Canada, but I've been part of politics for all parties. I was part of a left-wing party here in Canada. I ran for a center-right party. I've been mostly a lifelong member of the Liberal Party, or supporter at least, which is largely Canada's centrist party. I call myself a pragmatic progressive. So I have progressive views, but I'm also, when it comes to foreign policy, I'm a bit of a realpolitik kind of guy, which I think Ryan, given our many conversations in the car, would probably agree with. So, but the one thing that I do believe in, and always have, is, I know it sounds corny, but liberal democracy, small l, liberal, not just democracy, liberal democracy, constitutional liberal democracy, which is what we have built. Peace and prosperity, relatively speaking, but there has never been a more peaceful and prosperous time in human history than now. Don't believe what Trump tells you. Don't believe what any of these politicians tell you. It's halting, and it's slow, and there's you fall back, 2 steps forward, and then you take 1 step back. But there is no better time for people to be alive than now, in terms of health and prosperity and wealth and freedom. And yet that's not what we're told. And there is an active project underway to undermine our faith in not just democracy, but the institutions that underpin democracy, that they rely upon. So an independent judiciary, free and fair democratic elections. I hesitate to say honesty and integrity amongst politicians, but such a thing does exist. There are good politicians. There are good civil servants. There are good people that step forward to serve the public. And ufology and UFOs have played a not insignificant part in that. Because all of that stuff, Ernst Zundel, Jeff Rense, the core mission of people like that, and there are more and more of them that have come into ufology over the last 15 years than I think were there ever before. The core mission of those people is to slowly but surely undermine the public's belief in those things I just mentioned, the pillars of the liberal democratic order. Some are big, like some are big efforts. Others are little things working at the fringes. Hey, we got 2 people here, got 4 people over here, we got 1 person here, whatever. It doesn't have, every little bit counts. I don't think it's some grand organized conspiracy, although I do. I just don't think the UFO guys are part of it. But they are part and parcel of what's going on. And so it frustrates me. No, it doesn't frustrate me. I suppose I don't care enough to be frustrated. It angers me when I see guys like John Ventre. So, hey, look, I brought it more into the modern era. So John Ventre, MUFON state director, whatever the heck he was in Pennsylvania. I mean, MUFON. Oof. There's a lost cause, if ever there was one. And any organization that would continue to associate itself with Ventre, after what he said, I think it was in 2018, does not deserve your support. They are irredeemable. And you know what I'm going to do? Hey, look, I'm going to post it. So here's me, handsome-ish, devilish, rakish 58-year-old guy. Oh, and here's the post that John Ventre made back in, I think it was 2018. And just take a moment. I'm going to hum here and provide you with a soundtrack for just read along. Holy, what the? Sorry, I can't. I'm interjecting as you're reading. My bad. Son of a bitch. Who the is this guy? Okay, we're back. I assume you've read it by now. That's all the humming that I can do. I can whistle too. My wife is jealous of me that I can actually whistle. That's the only thing she's jealous of too. So Ventre, beyond the pale, posted some sort of half-hearted, wasn't even an apology, just kind of I'm sorry I said it because now you know that I'm a racist. And you would think that a guy like that would just be drummed out of ufology or any normal organization or group of people. Like, never want to hear from this guy again. Go away. No, he's still around. So that brings me to Nick Pope, because the greatest threat to Western liberal democracy now is partly Trump, but what Trump represents. Trump's an idiot. He's a clever idiot. And he's a bad guy. But he's not a rocket scientist. If you were to list presidents by smart and dumb, Trump's down here. But he has a cunning. He sort of knows people and what buttons to push and stuff like that. So I can respect his evil, weasel-like cunning. And he has tapped into something, the zeitgeist. Other politicians, populist politicians like Viktor Orban in Hungary have done this as well. And it's the same kind of thing that Hitler and Mussolini and others, Franco and the other fascists in the 1930s and 40s tapped into in Europe. And even in the United States with the German-American Bund, or Bund, as they say, and people like Francis Townsend and Father Charles Coughlin, it's always there, and they're always reaching in and tapping into it. But now social media and technology has allowed them to weaponize it in a way that has never been done before. So Fox News is the absolute exemplar. And all the spin-off sort of podcasts that have come out of it, and sort of news that have come out of it, and of that kind of propaganda machine, which is pushing that far-right message, not particularly subtly. There was a time, by the way, when Fox News, you could watch it, and they had a slightly right-wing bent to their news organization, much more right-wing bent to their opinionators, but that's what opinionators are. MSNBC has left-wingers. It's fine. Just choose not to watch them if you don't want to. But even the news reportage on Fox News, as the lawsuits that came out after the 2020 election have shown, is skewed now to undermining confidence in the elections and undermining confidence in liberal democracy. So why on God's name would you ever go on Fox News if you believe in those things? Well, because UFOs are the most important thing ever. No, they're not. Sorry. When the space aliens, if there are actually space aliens, make themselves clear to us and say, hey, how are you doing? Hey, we're the Federation. You're welcome to join. All right, then they maybe are the most important thing in human history. But they're not now. Now it's at best a mystery, and at worst explainable if you believe in space aliens. I'm not going to give you the answer because you find yours, I'll find mine. But it's not the most important thing. So you are presented as a UFO researcher with a choice. You can do your research and try and get your message out as best as possible and do it in an ethical way and in a way that is not aiding and abetting the destruction of democracy. Or you can go on Fox News and Tucker Carlson. Well, that would be Nick Pope because, hey, look, here's another screen capture for you. There's Nick Pope with Tucker Carlson, who, basically is, can I swear on this, Ryan? Yeah, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to swear. He's Putin's bitch. And Tucker Carlson, I remember when he was on Crossfire, and I actually thought, well, he's young and seems foolish, but yeah, he's articulate and he's right of center, but he's against a left of center guy. And this is kind of interesting. No, Tucker Carlson has gone full on Putin apologist and to the point where he's now talking to Holocaust denying historians, which they're not actually historians. Hey, maybe Hitler wasn't as bad as we think he was. That's how it starts. So why would you go on the Tucker Carlson show? You wouldn't. Why would you go on Fox News? You don't. No serious person should be going on these programs. They shouldn't be dealing with any of this stuff. And yet there they are. Nick Pope's the one I pointed out, but there's lots of others. The current crop of ufologists, don't be a part of that. Make your case elsewhere. I know I'm not, I'm either preaching to the converted or I'm not going to convert you. But that's not my message, or it's not my mission here. And I'm wrapping up now. My mission is not to convert you or to convince you to man the barricades against ufology, because there's a lot of good people in ufology too, and well-meaning people. It's just, I'm tired of it. I'm really tired of it. And it's a small, relatively penny ante part of a much bigger picture, but it's a part nonetheless. And it's a part that I can actually talk about and give some concrete examples of, and then encourage you to go look at your own. One of the other ones I might give to you is one of the most popular shows, might be the most popular television show, and I know about television shows too, in the history of the History Channel in the United States, and that's Ancient Aliens. So back to the subtle sort of racism that underlies a lot of ufology. So Ancient Aliens posits, generally speaking, that, hey, look, a pyramid or, whatever, all these things. Well, they weren't smart enough to build that. They couldn't have built that. How could they build that? It must have been aliens, right? Well, it's funny. A lot of the things, and I am perfectly comfortable in saying this, if you were to do a sort of deep dive into Ancient Aliens and go, how many of the things that they've studied or talked about relate to cultures that are non-white, European? I would say the majority, the overwhelming majority. Hey, here's one in, Peru. And here's an Aboriginal culture in Peru. Here's one in Africa. Here's one in the Middle East. They weren't smart enough. They couldn't have done that on their own. Of course they could have. They did. So when I look at a show like Ancient Aliens, I have many thoughts that go through my head. One, it's shitty television. Two, it's bad history. It's not even history. If Aaron Gullius is watching this, I think he would agree with me. It's just bad history. I've never talked to an historian, like an actual historian, who thinks that Ancient Aliens is good history. Or, hey, I think these guys are onto something. They're raising valid questions. It's always just raising questions, isn't it? No, it's terrible. But it's also racist. It's not, like in your face, sitting at a bus stop, dropping the N-word at a guy sitting next to you racism. It's the societal racism it's the Fothergill racism, if you will. And it's terrible and wrong and bad. And there's nothing I'm ever going to be able to do to get Ancient Aliens canceled. And I'm never going to work for them. So there you go. But I wouldn't be on the show either. Not going to get asked. Certainly not getting asked now. But I mean, we all have to make choices. And this is a time, as I wrap it up here, of choosing. And so to the UFO researchers out there, to the podcasters, to the writers and authors, and to the people who organize conferences, and frankly, just to your average person who's interested in the subject, which is absolutely fair because it's an interesting subject. And frankly, if there are space aliens out there, and I think there probably are, don't know if they're coming here, but that is maybe the biggest story in human history. Probably would be if we ever run into them. So an interest in the subject is fair. Making money off the subject is fair. Doing all sorts of things with the subject is fair. But aiding and abetting, being part of a culture that promotes racist thought, even if it's subliminal or subconscious, a culture that takes people like John Ventre and says, yeah, you're not banished forever. Welcome to another conference. Or you can speak here, or be on our radio show here. Also, they can sell some books or get some clicks on their podcast or get likes or views. Well, those people I don't have any use for. And it's, as I said, a time for choosing. Or as Billy Bragg would say, which side are you on? Boy, I think that's the actual lyric. Which side are you on, boy? Which side are you on? And his was talking about unions and work and bosses, labor stuff. But it applies to anything. Which side are you on? And there is a war being waged between those forces in our world that have provided us with the most peaceful and prosperous societies that human history has ever known. And those people who would tear it all apart. And ufology is part of that too. It's right in a little corner down here. And it's time for everybody to make a choice. I hope they make the right one. And if you make the wrong one, well, I've had my Facebook page suspended for calling the President of the United States a fascist one too many times. So you're not going to be able to find me anyway. It's like, I'm on Twitter. So you can find me on Twitter or, send me hate mail or whatever, because water off a duck's back, man. I've had it happen before. I'm perfectly happy to have it again. Although, speaking on behalf of my wife, I'd rather not. So just forget I was ever here. No. If you don't agree with what I've been saying. But hopefully I've given you something to think about, some threads to follow. It's a scatterbrain presentation. It's all over the place because that's who I am. But take a look, follow some of these threads, give it some thought. I think on my old blog, redstarfilms.blogspot.com, there's a few things that I wrote about the influence of anti-Semitism and racism and neo-Nazism within ufology. I've appeared on a podcast called The Daily Grail, where I talked with Greg Taylor and Miguel Romero recently, I think it was a couple months ago, about the right wing and the rightward elements within ufology and paranormal research. So you might want to look that podcast up too. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Holy shoot, Ryan, I think I hit 50 minutes. My bad, buddy. Sorry. Thanks to Ryan for doing the ANOMACON and for being my good friend and for letting me just sort of pontificate about things that have interested me for many years and sadly are more relevant than ever. I will leave you. Hey, Ryan, I'm going to drag this out 4 extra minutes. I think I'll leave you with a song I wrote back when I was a musician in the 1990s. And it was a song called Turned. Little did I know it was like the Nostradamus of the Canadian music scene back then, because most people were writing songs like, I love her, she loves me, let's go to Wendy's. I don't know, whatever they were writing. And I wrote a few love songs too, but I was also writing songs about politics. And I was already then seeing the increase in the far right in Western society. So one of the songs I wrote was a song called Turned. And it's, anyway, listen to the lyrics. Just make sure that you're not one of the turned, to use a zombie reference. All right. Thanks, everybody. And from Halifax, Nova Scotia, well, actually Fall River, Ryan's room's just down the hall. Whenever he stays with my wife and I, he's just down around the corner. He's not here right now. He's in Scotland. But he'll be in here October because, despite everything I said, I still find UFOs interesting. So we're going to go to the Shag Harbor UFO Expo to, as Captain, is it Evans from Firefly? I should know that. Raise a little ruckus. Misbehave. We aim to misbehave. That's it. So until we see you next time, just shut up, Paul. Just, here we go. Look, goodbye. I'm leaving. Hey, look, I'm actually going to leave. damn it, the whole thing didn't get out. Thanks for listening, and keep your eyes on the skies. See, that one's for you, Ryan.